I'm sure at one point or another we've all found ourselves sucking wind like Kirby and playing the mental game of trying not to give up in front of a large paying audience. And while physical fitness and conditioning are super important for preventing this from ever happening, I find often there are three other things that can cause that feeling of being gassed, even if you are in really good shape. The first one being the adrenaline dump, the second one being breathing or lack thereof, and the third one being pacing in the ring. In today's World-Beater Wrestling episode, I give you some practical tips on preventing these things from becoming issues anytime the red light comes on. I found that early in my career, despite feeling in perhaps the best shape of my life and being able to hit hundreds of Hindu squats and hundreds of push-ups and be able to go on sprints and runs and all the rest without much issue at all, I was still getting blown up in the ring. But then years later, when things like injuries got in the way and my training started to back off a little and I didn't feel as fit as I once was, I wasn't getting tired anytime a pro wrestling match came around. And that really started to make me question this whole thought of being in good shape and doing all the calisthenics and all the traditional pro wrestling training methods. And I started to figure out that maybe fitness is not as black and white as once thought. In the last 10 years, I can really only recall getting really gassed and blown up twice in my life. The first one was the match with Tajiri at the Cruiserweight Classic, which I detailed in a recent episode all about the Cruiserweight Classic. You can find that in the link above if you're on YouTube. And the other time was during a jiu-jitsu competition, one where I felt in tremendous shape. I had done everything I could in the lead up to practice for it. I felt confident, everything was looking good, much like the Cruiserweight Classic match, but as soon as it was go time, my legs turned to jelly, the fatigue set in, and again, I just could not understand why. Now, after doing a lot more research on the topic and speaking to others who have been in similar situations, I worked out that it really had nothing to do with my physical fitness. I was in shape. I was prepared. I was confident. I didn't even really feel nervous in any of these situations. But what I do notice in reflection, in hindsight, is that the adrenaline dump definitely became a factor. Now, what is the adrenaline dump? It's the sudden surge of adrenaline that goes through your body, perhaps when you're nervous, perhaps when you're excited, right when you're about to perform. And the whole point of adrenaline is to give us a real surge of strength, power, endurance, but only in the short term. Now, the issue with adrenaline is it saps your energy real fast. So if this is something that's going to happen regardless of being nervous or not, how can we fix this? The first thing is to visualize exactly what's going to happen in that match. Visualize all of the outcomes. Visualize the fact that you probably will get an adrenaline dump and that you probably will get a little nervous, a little anxious. You probably will struggle to take in enough oxygen and that energy will burn up quick. And just prepare for it happening. Because if you're prepared, you're less likely to panic when it does set in. It's not a great feeling. The second tip is to not stress too much about the outcome. Don't worry about what could go wrong. Think more about what could go right. And finally, it really does become something that with time and experience does tend to go away. And the more you can do something and the more you can do it regularly, the less likely you're going to feel those effects. So if you're competing in grappling, if you can do that as regularly as possible, awesome. If you're wrestling, wrestle as much as possible. Put yourself in stressful situations as much as possible. Stack the deck, put yourself in uncomfortable spots. And as I always say, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. The second possible factor, and this is one that often goes overlooked, is breathing. And the one thing I noticed when I was watching video back of these instances where I did feel really tired really quickly is that my breathing became very shallow. Now, this can often be an effect of the adrenaline dump. It can be an effect of being nervous, excited, what have you. And instead of having those deep, normal breaths we might have if we're just walking around normally, or even if we're in a relaxed environment while training, we start to have short, shallow, very brief breaths. Now, what that does is it disrupts the flow of oxygen and carbon dioxide. It disrupts the ratio in our body. It also raises our heart rate. It raises our blood pressure. It doesn't do anything good for us. Now, one thing that's helped me, and this is something that can help in the case of things like panic attacks and anxiety, is different types of breathing. Now, if you look on YouTube, there are so many different breathing coaches, and honestly, I think it's something that is really underutilized and something that I really want to focus more on in the future. One thing that has helped me is to use box breathing or square breathing. And what this basically is 4-second breaths in, hold, and out. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold out for 4 seconds. And I use this often before I have matches. Anytime I feel my heart rate starts skyrocketing, I start getting a bit nervous, standing backstage behind the entrance curtain, worrying about everything that can go wrong, as we often do as pro wrestlers, I start using these breaths and it calms me down very quickly. With both of these things, I think that other things can help you from person to person, things like playing your favorite music. I'll often play music that's quite calm and relaxing rather than a lot of metal or a bit of, doof, something with a real slow beat to it can often relax me. Also thinking about maybe your favorite sayings or quotes. So just having that internal monologue switching to something that keeps you a little bit more calm, that can definitely help the process. Finally, we're going to talk about match pacing, and this is something you can easily fix because it is something very much in your control when you're putting a match together and then when you're performing it in the moment. Often when we start off, we don't stop. We keep running through spots, we keep rushing, we panic because perhaps the crowd isn't really in our favor, they're not making noise, so we start to go quicker. We panic because perhaps something messed up, didn't go to plan, we start to go quicker. And all of these things only lead to being blown up in the ring. When we put a match together, think about how many times you're doing things that are highly fatiguing or highly taxing on the body. Things like up and down, doing big leapfrogs, dropping down, back flips and front flips, doing rope running, doing lifting counters. If we're countering 450 moves, that involves a lot of lifting, a lot of shifting the body weight. So think about what you're putting into your matches first. If you're having a lot of trouble with getting blown up no matter what you do, then maybe have programmed periods of downtime in your match. Instead of just thinking about, I'm going to do this here, and this is a sequence for this, and this is my comeback, think about when your breathing opportunities are. Okay, we've done this sequence. Now is the time that I'm going to take some deep breaths, relax, and once I'm ready to go, we'll shoot into our next sequence. And to be honest, this does become a little bit easier if you have longer matches. Although a 20 to 30 minute match may seem like a long time, it does mean you have more time to slow it right down, even stop the tempo completely. So personally, I find that having a 4 to 5 minute match can often be far more difficult than some longer length matches. When I go back and watch some of the greats who were considered to be some of the quickest and speediest in the ring, wrestlers like Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask, for example, you watch their matches and you will see that although they are super quick, super explosive, they have plenty of downtime. They'll go to an explosive sequence and then they'll lock on a hold. They'll have a rest. They'll have a quick break. They'll slow that tempo right down to 0 before getting back into the action. So those are 3 things that may affect you regardless of your fitness level, but I think it is important that we do talk a little bit about fitness today because without it, those 3 things aren't going to matter. If anything, they're going to make your life much more difficult. I won't spend too long on this because I have plenty of videos in the past about it. I will have plenty of videos in the future breaking it down even further. But the first thing I want to bring up is sport-specific conditioning. This is a bit of a buzzword going around at the moment, and it's all about it being best to train for your sport by actually performing your sport or something really, really similar. So in the case of pro wrestling, making sure that you are training in the ring as much as possible. And yeah, going for sprints, doing runs, things like that are going to help a little, but they won't help you as much as actually being in the ring and wrestling matches. If you're someone who trains in the gym and lifts weights and things like that, awesome, you're going to be in better shape aesthetically, but it won't necessarily help your fitness. So if you want to add more to your game outside of the ring, I would suggest taking on a little bit more of an athletic approach. look at the movements we do in wrestling and try to mimic that in the gym. Okay, with weights, a little bit different. But things like explosive deadlifts, using squats and other strength movements will help you in some way. If you're going to do some cardio or conditioning, think about wrestling. There's a lot of dropping down and getting up. So doing full body movements like burpees will help in some way. Things where you're moving your entire body in different directions, using explosive energy for short bursts, using your endurance by doing things for a long period of time, high reps, lightweight. These are all going to help in some way, specifically if you can't always get to training. Again, we need to think about our recovery. I had a whole episode or 2 episodes on this in the past, which I will link above on YouTube. And I spoke with Marcus Pitt all about some things that we often neglect, which keep us under recovered, and it is really going to make it so much more difficult to get into good shape, but also to perform at a high level. On that note, diet is super important. I am going to have a lot more episodes in the very, very, very near future. In fact, I'm about to film them right now, all about diet and getting yourself ready for show day or for training day if that's all you're doing. Carbohydrates are a fantastic energy source. They're the most efficient, the best energy source. So whether you're on a high carb diet or perhaps even a low carb diet, you can definitely utilize carbs in efficient ways. The best way to do this is make sure that you're eating a majority of your carbs, particularly if you're on a low carb diet, around your training sessions, both before and after. And hell, if you can even have a little bit during, perhaps in the form of an electrolyte drink like a Gatorade, Powerade, maybe even some gummy bears, that may help you in some ways also. Also making sure that you're not eating foods that you're not used to, not eating high-fat foods, things that are going to make you feel lethargic before training. Stick to things you know go well with your body. Don't mess with things too drastically. And if you're on a show, even more important, because you never want to get to the match. You're feeling nervous, your guts aren't feeling great, and you're rushing off to the toilet back and forth before you're about to go to the ring. And of course, stay hydrated, drink plenty of water, make sure that you replace all of those lost minerals that exit your body through training. There we have it, a lot of tips for you. I hope this really helps you. I know that when I first learnt about this, it was super eye-opening, things that no one had ever told me before, and it took a lot of research and speaking to people in the know from different industries and sports to really get a good grasp of this. So I myself am excited to use these protocols in the future. If you have any questions on the topic or anything else, please drop it into the comments below. Of course, if you're on YouTube right now, I would love it if you could hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and I hope to see you next week for another episode of World-Beater Wrestling.
If you want to see more videos like this, click on the subscribe button, spread the word, and if you have any questions or requests for World-Beater Wrestling, don't be afraid to comment below.